To me, my X-Men.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the first trailer for X-Men 97. I am so excited for this. Like a lot of you guys, I grew up on this cartoon. I have a VHS tape filled with all the episodes that I taped when I was a kid, and I am so grateful that Marvel decided to continue the story in this universe. So, I'm going to explain why this animated series is so important, and why this show might actually be setting up the live-action Avengers Secret Wars.
Wow, seriously?
Seriously, we think it's all going to be connected. And speaking of everything being connected, I have a huge announcement to make. In celebration of the Deadpool trailer released this week, you can now buy this Can You Tell Me How to Get to the MCU shirt and this MCU Jesus shirt at our merch store, ScreenCrushMerch.com, where we design all these parody merch shirts ourselves. Guys, shopping our merch store is the best way to directly support our channel. It enables us to make videos like this one, and just thank you so much for watching. So let's get rolling. So, X-Men the Animated Series was actually a groundbreaking Saturday morning cartoon. It came out when the X-Men were at the peak of their popularity, when they had just published the best-selling comic book of all time. In the comics, over the years, writer Chris Claremont and artist John Byrne and many other talented people evolved the X-Men into being a story that was about a metaphor for racism and homophobia. And the show, the animated show, tackled this prejudice head-on. In the first season, the X-Men go up against evil mutants, but they also face off against racial prejudice. It was a show that was steeped in civil rights that really helped make those issues salient for millions of kids across the world. I mean, hell, in the first season, one of the best X-Men, Beast, spends the entire season unjustly incarcerated. The main villains included robots created by racist humans just to hunt down mutants. The mutants are even enslaved on an island called Genosha. And we see a lot of these storylines revisited in this trailer, so let's dive in. First, we get this nostalgic image of an old 4x3 tube television. Now notice this picture of Scott and Jean. This is the same picture from the original Wolverine Crush meme. So, right away, the trailer is connecting our memories of the X-Men with the internet nostalgia of the present day. There's also this Colossus action figure, which I had. He had a lever on the back to let him curl that bar. In fact, that whole line of X-Men toys was spectacular, with every character having a different specialty added to their figure. Magneto had magnets in his hands, Archangel's wings would flap. So again, this made me nostalgic, like I'm sure it did for a lot of you. Now, our own Colton Ogburn, the guy who's trapped eternally in our television, but he doesn't know, so please don't tell him, he pointed out that the VHS tapes on top of the TV read X-Men Xmas Special, X-Men Cartoon, X-Men DOFP, which stands for Days of the Future Past, a classic story from the comics that was adapted in season 1 and 2 of the show.
You seem excited.
I am excited. High five.
And full of energy.
Well, that's because of the AG1.
Oh, is that a droid? Are you replacing me with a droid?
No, my guy, AG1 is my daily dietary supplement, and they're the sponsor of this video.
Oh, well, what's a daily dietary supple stuff mean?
Well, buddy, this is what we call a foundational nutrition drink. It is the best way to make sure that you get all the vitamins and minerals that your entire body needs throughout the day. It has 75 different ingredients, including vitamins, minerals, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. That's why this is the best nutritional drink I have ever used for workout recovery. I recover faster, and the high magnesium cuts down on muscle soreness. In fact, if you've ever taken a break from working out and you're just starting back, this drink would be perfect for you. There are also a lot of days when I just get really busy and I look up at the clock and see that it's already like 3:30, I've missed lunch, and I've got super low energy. But with AG1, I get all the nutrients that I need for the entire day. It is also very, very easy to use. You take one scoop, add it in there, and then I like to add in this D3 plus K2, which supports my immune system. And then you take it, shake it, and that is all you need for the day every day. Now, because this is so easy, it has become an essential part of my daily routine. No messy blenders, no powder, just water, shake, and I'm on my way to a healthier day. With AG1, I don't get run down and I always have plenty of energy. And it's not like a caffeine rush. AG1 contains rhodiola, magnesium, and vitamin B to create sustained energy throughout the entire day, which means I get more done. I'm not working late and I just feel better. And look, I know when it gets super cold outside, it's really hard to stay active and take care of yourself. So I always make sure to include some of this vitamin D3 K2 drops in my AG1. So if you guys sign up with our link in the description, you're going to help out our channel, and you're going to get a free welcome kit that includes the canister, a shaker, a year's supply of the vitamin D3 K2, and 5 extra travel packs for free. Just click the link in the description to get started on your first purchase of AG1. Now, back to the X-Men. Then they show the end of the X-Men series, which was canceled in 1996. Hence why this show is called X-Men 97. It's continuing on where that show left off. Now, I should note that Professor Xavier Xavier does not actually die in that episode like they imply in this trailer. In that episode, the evil human Henry Peter Gyrick attacks Charles, shoots him, and nearly kills him. The X-Men then sneak into Genosha, where Magneto's a warlord preparing to attack humanity.
This world is our world now!
And the X-Men tell him that his friend Charles is dying, so Magneto decides to not attack humanity and to instead visit his old friend.
Surely you have more pressing business to attend to than nursing an old friend. Nothing more important.
But just a couple seasons earlier, Xavier fell in love with the Empress Alondra, the ruler of the galactic Shi'ar Empire. So she shows up and says that she can cure Charles, but he has to go out and live in space, which actually happened in the comics. In the comics, Charles left, leaving Cyclops in charge of the school. So this shot of the X-Men and Magneto in front of the X-Mansion is actually them saying goodbye to Xavier as his ship leaves Earth. Now, maybe in the show, the cure didn't work and Charles died. That would actually be a great setup for this series. Like, what happens to the X-Men when Charles Xavier is no longer their leader? It also sets up Magneto for a babyface turn.
A babyface what?
Babyface turn. It's a wrestling term. It's when a bad guy wrestler suddenly becomes good, they call it a face turn because he becomes a babyface, a good guy.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I wasn't allowed to watch wrestling because it was too violent and demeaning to women.
Oh, well, you know, times have changed, man. Wrestling's really cool. So anyways, Magneto being a good guy is a huge feature in 80s X-Men comics. You see, in the comics, just like in the movies, Xavier and Magneto were actually really good friends in their youth. They just disagreed about whether humanity could ever really accept mutants. Now, Magneto, of course, went on to become the X-Men's greatest villain, but there was a brief period in the comics where he reformed and took over running Charles' school while Charles was off in space. So Chris Claremont's original intention here was to fully kill Charles Xavier off and then show Magneto's evolution to a full good guy.
I mean, my plan was by 300 to have Charlie killed and Magneto become the permanent head of the school.
And then the villain Apocalypse would take over as the X-Men's new big bad. Later, all this was retconned, long story, but it looks like the show is being faithful to Claremont's vision. We've seen Magneto wearing the comic-accurate and hilarious Giant M costume from the comics from when he was the headmaster of the school. And then we see the Marvel Studios logo in all yellow, the color of the original X-Men uniforms. And guys, this is actually kind of a huge moment. We have had X-Men teases in the MCU since Disney bought Fox, but this is our very first straight-up Marvel X-Men adaptation. And like I said earlier, we think that this is going to be setting up Secret Wars, with these X-Men being a key part of the multiverse saga. So in the opening shot, we see searchlights over a city. So this looks like the lights of the Sentinels when they would patrol cities looking for mutants. In the alley, this is Callisto, former leader of a group of underground mutants called the Morlocks.
Former leader?
Storm beat her in combat and became their actual leader, but then she left Callisto to rule in her place. And I believe next to her is Leech, a mutant who can turn off people's powers. And then we see an old abandoned skating rink, and then this newspaper headline catches us up on events. It talks about a mutant fashion gala, showing us the mutants are now somewhat at least accepted in this world. This one is dressed like Banshee, this one is Storm, and this one's dressed like your mom. The headline at the top is asking if Spider-Man is a mutant. Now, this is a fun nod to the 90s Spider-Man animated series, which actually crossed over with the X-Men animated series. Now, this of course is the Daily Bugle with the same masthead that we saw in the Sam Raimi films, and this article is about the Hellfire Gala. Now, the Hellfire Club are a group of super rich and influential mutants who performed evil deeds as part of their secret society. So maybe in this new, brighter future, they are public figures, no longer hiding their mutant abilities. Notice also that the article was written by one Eddie Brock, who later becomes Venom, and photos are by Peter Parker.
Wait, I thought Eddie Brock was a photographer, like that delightful Topher Grace in Spider-Man 3.
That was in the movie. In the comic book, he was a reporter, just like he was in the most recent film with Tom Hardy. Anyways, I'm hoping this is teasing that we're going to have another Spider-Man crossover with this team. We see this tribute to Charles and a coffin being lowered in the ground. Again, making me think that Shi'ar cure just didn't quite take. We hear this narration.
We have to stay vigilant.
So this is warning us that even though it looks like Xavier's dream of peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans has come true, there are still prejudiced humans like Henry Peter Gyrick out there who will always feel threatened by mutant kind. And then we see this anti-mutant protest. Notice this sign for the Friends of Humanity, the villains in Season 1. They are mutant-hating humans who, ironically, were led by a self-hating mutant. And then we see a giant Sentinel arm being recovered. Now the Sentinels were created by the scientist Bolivar Trask specifically to hunt down mutants. The X-Men faced them in the very first episode of the show. Now, I believe by the end of the series, though, all the Sentinel tech was supposedly destroyed, but here we can see that the program is about to be reinitiated. Storm narrates, saying,
"No matter how dark it is, we must believe in each other."
teasing that things are about to get a lot worse for mutants than they've ever been before. And then we see a meeting of the UN, and actually in the middle, this is Magneto addressing the General Assembly. When he becomes a good guy, he stops wearing his signature helmet because he only ever wore it to block out Charles Xavier's telepathy. And then we see statues of Xavier and Magneto on equal footing at the same height outside of Magneto's palace on Genosha. Genosha starts off as a slave colony where mutants are forced to wear inhibitor collars, like the ones we saw in Deadpool 2. But later in the series, in the comics, Magneto conquers the island to make it a haven for mutants. And then we see the X-Men, first as silhouettes. Now the trailer gives us only teases of them, only showing us a piece at a time. Here, I believe this is Jean, Cyclops, and Wolverine, maybe teasing that their famous love triangle is going to be continuing in this show. Then we get a close-up of Cyclops, the best X-Man.
Better than Wolverine?
Way better. And this, I will die on this hill. Like Wolverine, he's a badass, right? He's the anti-hero, the rogue. He comes and goes as he pleases. Scott Summers, though, is the guy who stays behind, who does the work and truly believes in Xavier's dream. And then we see Gambit wearing these hilarious 90s cutoff shirts with, I believe, an exposed belly button that he would sometimes wear in the comics. And he's using his powers to charge up the potential energy in this playing card. If I had a guess, I would say this is before the X-Men storm the Headmaster's office that we see at the end of this trailer. And then we get a quick look at Storm's boots and Wolverine's claws, and then...
Jeez, bub. Keep buzzing in my ear.
We're back, baby. So notice that Storm has her signature mohawk like she had in the comics in the 80s. Now, she sported this look when she temporarily lost her powers. And you know what? It would actually be really interesting to see if they go through that storyline on the show. Like, that story forced Storm to cope with essentially having a disability, losing her ability to control the weather. But she proved that she was still a formidable team leader even without being the most powerful X-Man. Also, in this wide shot of the X-Men we see on the Blackbird, we see Bishop. Now, in Season 1, Bishop time traveled to the past in an adaptation of the great storyline Days of the Future Past. And in that episode, he threw out this glorious insult.
Save some egg-sucking big shot, and suddenly everybody loves each other?
Bishop only shows up in the show when something terrible has happened in the future that he needs to change. So this has me thinking, are we going to see like a lot of these best X-Men stories ever told adapted into this one season? Like, are they going to do more modern stories that weren't even written when the show was released? Is X-Men 98 going to give us super weird stories like House of X? The possibilities for this show are limitless. Actually, I have a theory on why Bishop has shown up that I'm going to talk about later in the video. And then we see fireworks over Genosha, and these might have been caused by Jubilee. After all, fireworks are her powers. Now, Jubilee was like our entry point into the X-Men's world in the pilot. We saw the team and events through her eyes as she was rescued by the team and later joined them. Now, Rogue fulfilled a similar role in the very first live-action movie, and here we see that Morph is now with the team. Now, Morph was the only team member created just for the show. He gets seemingly killed off in the first episode, but later returns as a villain who was manipulated by Mr. Sinister before
doing another face turn?
Very good, dude. High five. So, Morph's powers are that he can look like other people. In the finale of the show, after Gyrick shoots the Professor, Morph actually impersonates the Professor and sends out a message to the mutants of the world, urging them to not seek retaliation.
Stand down. There are always peaceful alternatives.
And the final scene of the show implies that he stays with the team. But how funny would it be if he just died in the first episode?
Poor Morph.
Poor Morph. And then we see Bishop actually using his powers. He can absorb and redirect energy. And he's gonna need it as we see they're all encircled by the Sentinels. So maybe, actually this would be cool, what if we get to see the other X-Men travel into the dystopian future? That'd be a cool reversal of what we saw in the original series. Now, see this bald guy in the very 90s leather jacket? That is not the Professor, but he's kind of the Professor's substitute. That is Caliban, who actually appeared in X-Men Apocalypse and in Logan.
She's a mistake of my own. I did what I could and they burnt me and beat me. Your colleagues are savages.
His ability is to detect mutants. Now, in the past, the Professor would have done this with Cerebro. But now, with the Professor dead, the X-Men could have recruited Caliban to help them track down mutants before the Sentinels could.
Or, the Sentinels could be using Caliban to track down mutants like they did in Logan.
Ooh, that's a good theory. I like that. And then we see Gambit ride Wolverine like a horse, and notice how Gambit uses his powers to charge up Wolverine's claws with potential energy before he can strike. That's actually something we never saw in the original show, and I'm awesome to see them use their powers together like this throughout this series. And honestly, this next scene, this really got me.
To me, my X-Men.
Now, that is the line the Professor always uses to call the X-Men together in combat situations.
I am proud of you all, my X-Men.
Having Cyclops use the line not only shows that he is the leader of this team, but also that he is saying, I am willing to take the professor's place and protect this dream. In the comics, this was a big struggle for Scott. He felt like he was inadequate to fulfilling the professor's shoes. But here we see that he's taken on the mantle himself, and he is going to be the guy to lead this team in the future. So in this shot, though, we see that Jean is pregnant. Now, in the comics, Scott and Jean have a couple possible kids, kind of. Rachel Summers is their daughter from a dystopian future who travels back in time and joins the X-Men, while Cable is actually the son of Cyclops and a clone of Jean Grey named Madeline Pryor. But later, Jean basically claims Cable as her son. It's a long story. Now, we see Cable a few times on the original series, but we never actually saw Rachel. So I think with all these time travel shenanigans that we might be seeing a Terminator kind of plot line. Rachel is the savior of humanity in the future, so the Sentinels send a time-traveling robot into the past to kill a pregnant Jean Grey. Or they could also be adapting Hope Summers from the comics, who was not Scott and Jean's biological daughter, but was still perceived to be a kind of mutant messiah. And then we get The Button, where Magneto is reading Xavier's last will and testament, a hardbound volume embossed with an X because the guy loved his branding. And when Magneto hands the X-Men the copy of Charles' last will and testament, notice that on the corners the metal bindings of the book glow, showing how Magneto uses his powers to make the book float across the room. And we find out that Magneto, just like in the comics, has become the new headmaster. Now, the trailer makes this seem all villainous.
Everything he built now belongs to me.
But in the comic book The Age of Apocalypse, in a different dystopian future, Xavier's death actually causes Magneto to change his ways. He dedicates his life to keeping his friend's dream alive, and I am really looking forward to seeing that play out on this show. Now, I keep saying that we think this is going to lead into the live-action Avengers Secret Wars. A few months ago, Colton had a great theory that we talked about in this video about the Marvel's post-credits scene. Now, that scene showed Kelsey Grammer reprising his role as Beast, but he is dressed in a lab coat just like Beast in the animated series, and he's wearing the same round glasses. Now, so far, every time in the MCU we've heard mention of mutants or the X-Men, we hear the melody of the animated theme song.
Like a mutation.
We should tell him the truth.
Maybe this is all implying that the X-Men animated series is going to be the X-Men universe we see in the Marvels. And we've theorized for a while that Avengers the Kang Dynasty was going to become Avengers vs. X-Men, resulting in Feige and Marvel essentially merging these two universes after Secret Wars. And we've already seen that Marvel animated shows are canon. I mean, they take place in the multiverse like What If. So maybe this show, X-Men 97, is giving us a crucial backstory leading into the Avengers that we're going to see in Avengers 5. Well, guys, that's everything we noticed about the trailer. If there's any Easter eggs we missed, let us know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.